So we've already started now talking about Chapter 12. In Part 1, we discussed the 6 main categories of indirect pay, and now I'm going to talk about some other elements of indirect pay, namely the structure, how to design benefit system, things to consider, etc. There are 3 different types of benefit systems. There's a fixed benefit system where there's sort of a one size fits all, so one size or one set of benefits for everybody. The other side of that is a flexible benefit system, so that's where there's a lot of choice offered to employees. And then the middle ground is a semi-flexible benefit system, which offers really the best of both worlds. Fixed benefit systems are very common. In fact, you see here that it's the norm, where all employees are covered by a standard package of benefits. The advantages are that they are pretty simplistic because you are doing a one-size-fits-all for everybody, which also leads into economies of scale. So if everybody's doing the same plan, then you benefit from having lots of employees in that plan, and then the costs come down for the employer. Low administrative costs as well, and then it's pretty straightforward and easy to communicate the plan to employees. Having said that, one of the disadvantages of a fixed system is that it's really hard to find a one-size-fits-all. This is why flex benefits plans have sort of come into play now. But a fixed system is most common, I would say, in smaller organizations where they really need to benefit from the economies of scale. So if you have a small number of employees, chances are you're going to have a fixed benefits plan so that you have enough employees in the plan. Rather than a flex benefits, when you give them options, it means that not everybody's in the same option, so then your costs could increase. So fixed benefit systems, probably more common for smaller organizations. The second type of benefit system is a semi-flexible benefit system. So recognizing that not all systems are entirely fixed, and so there might be some that are semi or a simplified flex plan. As mentioned several times, it's really hard to find a one-size-fits-all. So this is an employer's attempt to try to offer some flexibility as well. So commonly what would happen is that there would be a core set of benefits. So there's sort of a standard that all employees will be provided. So they have to get that. There's no choice around that. But then employees can add on different levels. So that's where the flexible plan comes into play. If they want to change some of their levels, they can add on, perhaps even subtract, depending on the plan. But if they do nothing at all, they at least have a core set that they are guaranteed to have from the employer. Flexible benefit systems are the third type of benefit system. And these have really grown in popularity and use over the years. And that's because it allows employees to have a little bit more control and flexibility over what they choose and what they're going to use in benefits. So as mentioned before, it's hard to create a one-size-fits-all. They are pretty rigid once they're put into play. It's hard to take away benefits once they've been implemented. So it is really useful to be able to provide options to employees. So if they want to use, if there's a medical plan, for example, or a health and dental plan, and they want to choose the lowest option, so maybe the lowest option is only 50% coverage, and then another option might be 75% coverage, and then a third option could be 100% coverage. So there's different options and different levels of coverage depending on what the employee feels that they're going to use. With flexible systems, how it typically works is that there's a certain amount of credits that's allocated. So, and each option has a particular price tag associated with it. So employees can use those credits to purchase different options. And then this is where I talked about healthcare spending accounts before. This is where if there's leftover credits or a leftover amount, that can be put into a healthcare spending account in some situations. Not all companies have that, but that's where it can be used. This is also called a cafeteria plan. You might see it referred to as that because really, again, there's choice for the employees. They can pick and choose what is going to be most suitable to them and their needs. There's often a re-enrollment period, and that could be an annual re-enrollment period because maybe after 1 year, your circumstances have changed. Sometimes they will allow you to reselect your options when there's a significant change in your life. So perhaps you got married, or something else significant happened where you need to change different types of coverage. So why we started having flexible benefits and why they became more popular was originated in the US, where there were really huge benefits costs, and they needed to think of a solution to basically mitigate some of those costs. So, as I mentioned before, costs are quite significant in benefits, and if not everybody's using them, then it's kind of not the best use of funds for the employers. So it doesn't make sense to be paying so much money in a fixed plan when not everybody's even using the plan. So this is why flex benefits came into play. Just as there are benefits of flex benefits or advantages of flex benefits, there's also deterrence. So as you can see here, there's one-time substantial implementation costs. So you can think about the cost in having people design all of the plans, in costing all of the plans, and then typically organizations would hire another company for benefits enrollment. So, if a benefits provider is, let's say, Manulife or Sun Life, there might be a middle person. So I know that when I worked at Buck Consultants, one of the things that they did was benefits administration, and the bank actually used them. So the bank would use Buck Consultants to do all of their benefit selections, and then that would be coordinated through Sun Life or Manulife, so whoever the benefits provider is. So as you can imagine, as you can see, there's a lot of administration, a lot of administrative costs in setting it up. The other thing is that there could be a loss of economies of scale. And so where there's an option, let's say there's 4 options in healthcare, and let's say health benefits, and option 1 is to opt out. So why people might opt out is if they have coverage through a spouse or through a common law partner, they have benefits coverage elsewhere, so they might choose to opt out. Well, what happens is if an employee is opting out of the plan, then we lose the economies of scale. So the whole point is that you need, to benefit from economies of scale, is that you need people in the plan in order to keep the costs down. So this is what this point is saying, is that you might lose economies of scale in purchasing some of the benefits. And then also employees can become really confused by all of the choices. And I know I've had a friend and colleague come to me and ask me to explain benefits to them. You're hearing about benefits today. You're going to hear it lots of times in your careers, and you've probably already heard it a few times already in this program, and yet there's still probably a little bit of confusion. So, and because they're all so specific to the company, all of these plans. So I always encourage people to look through their benefits plans in order to make the best selections. But having said that, companies know that not everybody's going to make the time to do that. So there's always a default, so that if employees do not read through and do not make their selections, the company will do that for you and perhaps pick option 1 across the board. So not ideal, but at least that way they're ensuring that the employees are choosing some level of benefits. So other things that might deter the adoption of flexible benefits would be company culture. And we know that company culture can impact all compensation design. So benefits is no exception to that rule. The other thing is that employees might make unwise benefits choices. So they might choose a particular level of coverage or potentially opt out, as I was saying before, when then there is a real issue and they actually need that benefits coverage. So sometimes they don't make the best choices, or sometimes they don't make educated choices because they don't make the time to go through all of the different selections and options. It's also it can be quite complex. As I mentioned, there are people that have come to me to ask me to explain it to them numerous times, and I myself don't even always understand the benefits plans that they've got. So there is a huge level of complexity when you've got flexible benefits plans. And then also just to reiterate that there is a high administrative cost for employers, not only because of the re-enrollment. So if you've got a particular plan, if you have fixed benefits, it's fixed. You don't have to, relook at it, or the employees don't have to make any choices. But if you've got flexible plans, the employees have to make choices, and it could be annual, it could be every other year, but that adds a huge level of administration to, potentially a third party that might be managing that process, to the benefits group, to all of the employees. So there is a lot of work in implementing and maintaining a flex plan. However, there are significant advantages to it. So as you can see, and as you're learning today, benefit systems are very common. They've been in use for more than 20 years in Canada. Again, they did originate in the United States, but they've been in use for a long time in Canada. And certainly there's been a really great response for them. Employees do value the options, or the ability to customize, where they make the time to learn about all of the different options. But having said all of that, there's little research about their cost effects, and the impact that the plans have on the costs is unknown. So as much as we can say that we implement flex plans in order to keep our benefits costs manageable or lower, the impact is ultimately not really known. There's also, as you can see, almost no difference in the percentage of benefits as a proportion of total compensation. So whether we pick flex plans or flexible plans, we still have, as we've learned in Chapter 4, typically about a 15% of total compensation is indirect pay. In designing the benefit system, there are several steps that need to be considered and that need to be taken. Benefits, as mentioned before, is a specialized area of compensation, and in larger organizations there are specific benefits departments, and now that's even expanded to benefits and wellness departments. So they would be the ones that would be designing the system. Having said that, the first step is to really determine the role of indirect pay. And here you really need to consider what the managerial strategy is of the organization. So you know that for classical or human relations, well, classical first, benefits will have to play into effect there, but only for mandatory benefits. If it's human relations, well, that's where there's the social component, and that there will be a bigger role for indirect pay. In high involvement organizations, as you can imagine, that's really where there is a huge role of indirect pay. So you really need to consider what is the role depending on the managerial strategy. The second step is to choose the process for plan design. So is it something that will be done in-house? Is it something that you've got the specialization inside the organization to be able to design? Will you be using consultants? Will you be using an administration company? How will you be designing what is the process for designing that plan? The third step is to identify the system and the benefits to be included. So are you using a fixed system, flexible, semi-flexible? What type of system do you want to implement? And to that end, what benefits are going to be included? So are you looking at health and dental? Are you looking at pension? Are you looking at any miscellaneous benefits or any employee services? So what is it that will be included? The fourth aspect here, the fourth step, is to determine the structure of each benefit. So will the benefit be covered at 100%? Will it be covered at a lower coverage? What will be included in that benefit as well? And the fifth and final step is to develop procedures for administering, communicating, and evaluating the benefit system. So how will it be administered? Will there be an annual re-enrollment process? How will it be communicated? Will it all be online? Will there be some classroom discussions? Will we put the onus on the managers to communicate? Will we just put the onus on the employees to learn on their own? So what are those procedures, and what supports are in place in order to do those? It's also important to evaluate and adapt the benefit system. So we need to evaluate the system on a regular basis to determine whether it's meeting its objectives in the most cost-effective way. So just as for base pay, we need to evaluate that typically on an annual basis, benefits also needs to be reviewed on a regular basis. So there's different types of analysis, as you can see here: cost, competitive, and then benefit surveys. I would suggest that annually cost analysis and competitive analysis is done. So you certainly want to review the costs every year to see whether it does make sense, to see where costs are going up. This is where organizations will become a little bit more creative in either as I mentioned earlier, with prescription medication having a generic drug used rather than the name brand, they might have to look at ways to manage the costs. And also in sharing the costs. So whenever costs do go up, the employer bears some of that burden, but also the employee has to pay a little bit more as well. Competitive analysis is looking at in the marketplace. So just as we discussed in Chapter 9, how there's base salary surveys, there's often benefit surveys as well. So you're able to benchmark your benefits practices to the market. So that's always a useful exercise as well. And then less frequently, I would say that benefit surveys are conducted. So, it examines employee satisfaction with each benefit and its value to them. The thing here is that if you are going to implement a benefit survey, you have to be willing to do something with the information. So if you are just putting out a survey but you have no intent whatsoever of changing the system, then I would say it's not going to be a really good exercise. And in fact, it might increase the expectations of the employees because they might think that the whole benefit system is going to change. So it's useful to do a benefit survey when you are looking at a redesign in either a fixed or a flexible benefit system. So I'd like you to do the following discussion question, and I'm going to ask you to hand it in to me in class next week. So 3 firms are described below. For each firm, identify the role, if any, that you believe indirect pay should play in the comp system and the specific benefits that it would make most sense to offer, and explain why. So the first thing you're going to want to do once you review the really brief description of these companies is to identify what managerial strategy they are following. Is it classical, human relations, or high involvement? That's going to help you figure out what role indirect pay is going to play. Once you've identified that, then I want you to consider what specific benefits you would offer in each of these organizations. Okay, so again, I want you to document that, and you can submit that into class to me next week in a hard copy. So it can be handwritten or it can be typed, it doesn't really matter, but I will ask for that to be submitted.